Insatiable in their lust for knowledge, the practitioners of magic yearn to see beyond the tangible world, to learn the secret laws that govern the fates of souls and nations. In every age, scholars sought to piece together fragments of these hidden truths and to grant themselves a kind of immortality by preserving their hard-won discoveries for adepts as yet unborn. Their messages took different forms. Fragile baked clay tablets bore cuneiform impressions made with reed pens when the clay was new and soft. Carved hieroglyphic charms were sealed in the changeless air of the pharaoh's underground tombs. Shreds of papyrus lay under hot sands that over the centuries crept whispering away, revealing the scrolls, finally, to the eyes of mystified herdsmen. Tall sentinel stones, inscribed with spidery runes, wept with the gentle rain that soaked the hillsides where they stood. Heavy volumes with black-lettered pages were chained out of sight in monastic libraries. Encapsulated in silent characters, the words waited, charged with arcane powers. To those adventurers who would crack their codes, the chroniclers passed on a caveat. The secrets of the universe were not lightly disclosed. Any unworthy soul who probed too deep risked an unspeakable fate. Yet, the lure of knowledge often overcame the dictates of caution. One seeker who could not quit the quest, despite the cost, was Prince Neferkepta, son of 18th dynasty pharaoh, and an accomplished sorcerer in his own right. Dedicated to the pursuit of occult wisdom, he spent his days studying texts that were carved on the walls of the temples within the pyramids of Egypt's long-dead kings. It happened once, in an ancient shrine at Memphis, when the prince was pursuing his researches, that a harsh laugh interrupted his concentration. He turned from the hieroglyphics he was transcribing, to find that a temple priest stood watching him. The man asked Neferkepta why he wasted his time on trivialities when, if he wished, he could go straight to the fountainhead of all knowledge. Neferkepta's pulse raced. He knew that the priest meant the Book of Thoth, written by a deity of the name, patron of wisdom and scribe of the gods, the inventor of speech itself. The book's 42 scrolls contained all the wisdom of the world. The very first lines imparted to a reader an understanding of the languages of all creatures. The next passage reveals the secrets of the divinities and all that was hidden in the stars. The pages that followed contained revelations far beyond the comprehension of all but the most gifted of initiates. Every scholar spoke of this legendary text, but none had ever seen it. Neferkepta immediately offered any price for knowledge of the book's whereabouts. All the priest asked in payment was 100 bars of silver and burial with royal privileges. Thus granted, he told the pharaoh's son that the book lay in the innermost casket of a nested series of boxes, sunk in the Nile at Koptos, far to the south. Reptiles and scorpions surrounded it, and a deathless serpent protected it from thieves. Neferkepta brought this news to his wife, Ahura, who, according to the pharaonic custom, was also his sister. She was the companion of his heart in everything, and the mother of Merab, his idolized son. Convinced that evil would come of her husband's fanatical pursuit of knowledge, Ahura begged him to desist. But Neferkepta ignored her. From the pharaoh, father of them both, he begged the use of the royal barge. With Ahura and Merab, he sailed to Koptos in search of the book. At Koptos, Neferkepta settled with his wife and son in a riverside palace and went alone to the bank of the Nile to begin his preparations. If the fishermen there had looked up from their nets or the peasants from their fields, they would have seen something wonderful and strange. For Neferkepta conjured out of nothing a small house, no larger than the inner chamber of a tomb. With whispered spells, he created an army of small statues, men in miniature, and imbued them with life. Then he set them all to work. Some were commanded to load the barge up with sand from the riverbank, which they did with an alacrity that no human laborer many times their size could equal. The others Neferkeptah ordered into the little house, which, by means of spells and with the aid of a stout rope, he proceeded to lower inch by inch, until it rested on the bottom of the Nile. With solemn words of evocation, the sorcerer prince called on his creatures to search the riverbed until they found the Book of Thoth, and at once they appeared, shimmering under the surface, as at home in water as in air. After 3 days and nights of painstaking toil, one of them swam up through the water to tell Neferkeptah the book had been found. Smiling with his own cunning, Neferkeptah called out again, and the small creatures began to shovel the sand from the barge into the river, spadeful by spadeful, forming a shoal that gradually rose up toward the light and broke the surface of the water. Step by step, the miniature slaves pushed their prize up the underwater hill of sand, till finally, alive with writhing reptiles and scorpions, the box containing the Book of Thoth emerged into daylight. The serpent that could not die lay coiled around it. Neferkeptah stepped from the riverbank onto the shoal. With a cry of command, he struck the snakes and the scorpions into immobility. However, the great serpent was immune to his spells, as well as to physical assaults. When Neferkeptah smote off its head, the two parts instantly drew towards each other. The prince was as quick-witted as he was skilled in the magic arts, and by sealing the cut surfaces of the snake's body and head with sand, he prevented the two pieces from knitting together. Helpless at last, the box's faithful guardian lay inanimate, its muscular coils slack and useless, as its conqueror rifled the treasure that it had watched since the dawn of time. Just as the priest had described to Neferkeptah, each box concealed another. The outermost was of iron, the next bronze, the third wrought of sycamore wood. Inside it was a case of exquisite workmanship made of ivory and ebony, containing a silver casket that itself closed a box fashioned from gold. Opening them with trembling fingers, Neferkeptah at last set eyes upon his treasure, the 42 small scrolls that made up the Book of Thoth. He took the first scroll in his hands and scanned it. Then he raised his head. All at once, he understood the calls of the water birds and the language of the land creatures. Even the hissing of snakes had meaning to him. He read on, and then gazed up at the heavens and knew the secrets of the stars. Clutching his prize, Neferkeptah hurried back to Ahura. Thrusting the scrolls at her, he implored her to cast her eyes over the first few lines. The woman recoiled at the sight, as if snakes and scorpions still writhed around the scrolls, but she yielded to her husband's entreaties. Within moments, she too possessed the miraculous knowledge. But it did her little good, for Neferkeptah committed an act of sacrilege that called down wrath upon their heads. To make the spells his own, he copied them on sheets of papyrus, and over the writing he poured barley beer, so that the ink, still wet, mingled with the brew, and ran down the pages into a cup. Raising the vessel to his lips, the prince imbibed the liquid, and thus took the magic words into his own body. Triumphant, he offered a draught to Ahura, but she clamped her lips together and shook her head in anguished refusal. Punishment came swiftly, though. The family set off for Memphis, but the royal barge they sat upon swung around in the water to float above the spot where the book had rested. As it hovered, the little boy, Merib, rose from his place as if in a dream and walked straight off the deck into the water, where he sank from sight. With trembling hands, Neferkeptah found a spell in the Book of Thoth that grew the child's body to the surface, but no magic existed that could bring him back to life. Shattered, Neferkeptah and Ahura returned to the shore to bury their child according to the ancient rites. At last they set out again to bring their father the news of their misfortune. But when they came to the place where Merib had died, Ahura too was drawn entranced and unresisting out of the boat to drown in the river. The second time, Neferkepta used sorcery to redeem the body from the water, but he could not restore his beloved to life. He returned to Koptos, once more, borne by grief, to bury his wife beside their child. A third time Neferkepta set out for Memphis, and as his barge progressed along the water, many people paused in their labors. Farmers and fishermen, carpenters and scribes, cooks and priests, to watch the scion of Egypt's royal house pass by. But Neferkepta never appeared on deck. No banners fluttered. No rowers chanted as the barge slid silently between the reed-fringed banks. Some folk claimed much later that they heard inhuman voices emanating from the craft, hissing, wailing, screams, and howls. After a long, slow voyage, the boat arrived at last at Egypt's capital city. The pharaoh came on board to greet his son, but all was silent. In the cabin lay the corpse of Neferkepta, its sightless eyes open wide, and on its breast draped the scrolls of the Book of Thoth. So was Neferkepta destroyed for his presumption in appropriating the Book of all books, which contained in its purest form the body of knowledge that gave power over the whole of creation. But his fate deterred few. In every age appeared power-seekers ready to risk everything to gain possession of the priceless discoveries of vanished masters, ready to follow up the slightest rumor that might lead them into the secrets of ages past. Diverse figures stood in Neferkepta's succession, stiff-bearded Assyrian sorcerers, turning their eyes to the heavens, wizened sibyls in sacred groves, reeling from narcotic fumes as they strove to hold the truths that they had glimpsed through the rents of consciousness. Celtic seers crooning for long nights in the smoky gloom of rain-swept hovels. Moorish philosophers working quietly in the austere peace of marbled Cordoban courts. Gowned scholars solitary at midnight behind the tall, leaded windows of medieval castles, appalled but unflinching in their obsessional quest